Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. Today's show is brought to you by the Phantasma Wine and Spirits Wine Bottle of the Month Club. Each bottle comes with its own ghost to help you drink the wine, so you can have a bit of good drink and good company with Phantasma Wine and Spirits. Look them up, and we thank them for being our imaginary sponsor today. And our non-imaginary guest today is a paranormal investigator, a witch, a cosmic witch at that. We're getting cosmic today. An author, a ufologist, and an all-around wonderful person that I'm glad to actually finally talk to. Susan Demeter. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
talk in text, like text format, but it's so nice to be able to hear your voice and, and just have a real conversation.
Yeah, I agree. It has been quite a while that we've been kind of connected through the internet, the magic of
Mhm.
the internet, and I love that. For all the bad things about social media and people talking badly about it, it's connected
Yeah.
me to some really great people. So and you're one of them. So it's
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and likewise. And yeah, I feel the same way too. I've met a lot of really great people, and I've been able to form some really lovely friendships with people that I may not have otherwise known if it wasn't for the internet or social media. Because, I'm still like I'm at that age where I still remember analog and like
yeah,
and how amazing it was the early days, like long before social media was a thing, where, you could really connect with people that are into these weird topics that we're into. Uh,
hmm
and like you could find people all over the world, and you might not like, in your own neighborhood know anybody like yourself, but there was the internet.
yeah,
For
yeah,
better, for worse, sometimes for worse. It's really fun to be able to connect with people that have strange experiences or are just into these subjects that like we're both into. It was really cool.
yeah, yeah. It is, and
Mhm.
uh, I think that part of the wonders of technology that still amaze me, because we're talking face to face and you're sitting in Italy right now.
Yeah.
I'm in Massachusetts in the United States. And to me, like, that was, I always think of like Star Trek when I was a kid, just watching like old episodes of Star Trek, and they would have a face to face video call. And
Yeah.
like, that's pretty low tech as far as that series is concerned, but I remember thinking like that would be so cool if I could just talk to somebody like through a video screen like that on the other side of the world.
Oh yeah, for
so,
me it was like the
so
Jetsons. Like, oh wow, like they have they're talking to each other like on TV. How cool is that? And
right,
yeah, like being a little kid watching the Jetsons or like Star Trek and their communication device, right? And now we have our mobile phones, and that's pretty much what it is. And I'm pretty sure that some of these people were inspired by like Gene Roddenberry or maybe even Hanna-Barbera, who knows? But I mean, into inventing this technology, which is really cool.
yeah. Actually, that is something I wanted to ask you about, because one part of your book, Cosmic Witch, that
Mhm.
that really made me smile and I enjoyed a lot was you talking about like pop culture archetypes of witches
Mhm.
and witchcraft. and
Hmm.
how that kind of informed your own practice and your own identity as a witch. And
Oh, for sure.
particularly because you mentioned Bewitched, and I thought that was great.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I mean, who can't love Samantha Stevens? And she's so sweet. But at the same point, as a kid, even I was kind of pulled towards Andorra because
right.
Andorra was just like she was unashamedly a witch. Samantha was trying to kind of suppress her own magical power to fit in with society. And
Right.
Andorra was, I don't care about these muggles. I'm doing my thing, right? So, and just the way like she dressed and she was just this tough as nails, kind of Agnes Moorehead. I really,
Yeah.
really was pulled in by that character. And I thought like she was so fun. That whole series was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of that, and then of course, the movie The Craft and
Yeah.
I think it helped to launch like a lot of witches or people that, are drawn to that, which is really cool. I think pop culture, of course, plays a role in these things. So,
Yeah, I do too. And that's kind of like, I mean, in starting this podcast, I had a couple different ideas for what I wanted to do. And
hmm.
um, my wonderful wife, who always gives me great perspective, said you could just do all of those things in one show. And I was like, hey, you're right. But I
Yeah.
mean, so I mean, sometimes I'm just talking about a movie, but other times I'm
Hmm.
talking about paranormal and spooky stuff. But I have long thought that these things really are intertwined. It's our pop culture representation of weirdness informs weirdness in real life, and it's kind of like a feedback loop.
Oh,
So
100%, 100%. And I think it was Whitley Strieber that was saying that we need better science fiction in
yeah,
regards to his own experiences being informed by like 1950s, pop culture version of aliens and flying saucers and these kind of things, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 so it does like, and you got to be careful about what you consume pop culture wise as well or take in too much of it. Like I love horror movies. I love love them. It's my favorite genre.
yeah,
But I also have to take breaks because I do realize you're taking it in. Um and then just like doing a magical working, you have to kind of reground yourself after you go into that kind of genre or any kind of pop culture because it does like it does inform
yeah,
things, transpire in the real world. Sure.
yeah. When I've spoken to Alan Greenfield in the past, he's recommended a steady um, a steady diet of Looney Tunes cartoons and Mel Brooks movies in between heavy duty workings because
Yeah.
you got to keep a sense of humor with it too.
Oh, I keep
Um,
a sense of humor through the working as well. Like I just, I think it really like it has to come from within yourself. And if you're a trickstery, jokesy like person, if you incorporate that in, it's gonna work better for you. Like everything
right,
I've ever done has that kind of funny, trickstery type vibe. Everything that I've done that's worked out really well for me has had that because I think that's part of my personality. Even my cards are like they're jokesters. So
right,
it's like my tarot cards and their personality take on the personality of the person who's using them as well, I think. And yeah, so I incorporate it directly into I never take myself seriously, even as I'm doing a ritual that I've crafted. I can't. I
yeah,
just I incorporate humor and silliness and because it's coming naturally from me. That's how it flows. So I think that when I'm speaking with the universe or whatever, it just flows better that way.
I believe so too. And like I've long thought that the phenomena operates better or more actively uh, in engagement with a form of playfulness and
Oh, it does.
and yeah, and laughter. Like that helps a lot. And I guess that's maybe why I've never really been too drawn to like high ritual, ceremonial, Western, like hermetic style of magic. And I've read a lot about it. And like when it gets too like Freemasonry bores me to tears.
Hmm.
I hate
Hmm.
reading about it, and I feel like I'm just going to mass or something at a Catholic church, which
Yeah, yeah, no, it
that
is there's so much like there's so much like my husband comes, he's a Freemason. And his father was a Freemason and that, and there is a lot of, and even he said like the rituals and all that that they have to do. It is a magical working as they do it as a group, even if some
yeah,
of them don't necessarily understand that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. And it is, there's a lot of steps and the way you have to do it in a precise way, even like the way you move your body has to be in a certain rhythm in a certain way when they're doing these things, and it can be like, to me that would drive me crazy and I wouldn't be able to do anything magical under those
right,
circumstances.
yep,
So more power
and
to these people, but it's just not, I'm doing the
that's
low magic.
that yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, and like I don't mean to disparage it at all because I absolutely understand its usefulness and the efficaciousness of ritual and the passion play element of it and
Mhm.
all of that. Like I'm not saying it doesn't work or it's not good, but it's not something I would tolerate well, I don't think. Like I'm a little bit more chaotic and kind of a trickster in my
Yeah,
own
yeah,
life.
exactly.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you have to be able to vibe with what you're doing because if it feels unnatural to you, I mean, I forget who I was reading something. I think it was a spell book of some sort, and I always advocate people to just write their own spells and do their own rituals. But this one, they were rhyming couplets and they were beautiful, beautiful rhyming couplets. But I mean, I can't memorize that. I can't
right.
make, I'm not, if I'm going to have to try and, speak in such a way, it's just not going to work for me. I'm either going to be laughing or I'm just not going to remember. So when I speak, even with my deity, um, or spirits, or I'm doing a magical working where I'm speaking, I do it from what's bubbling up from my heart. I
Mhm.
can't, and that might be a joke, or it might be funny, or it might be, but that's my personality, and that's where it's coming from. What I wouldn't believe in myself if I was trying to do things too seriously. Although I do respect people who do, and I understand that, but I just don't vibe with that. Like I can't. I've tried. And I can't.
Yeah. Well, I could see that's probably why we get along so well
Yeah.
and enjoy each other's work because we kind of have that same mentality there.
Yeah.
And also, we share the affinity for the number 23,
Yes.
which has its own trickster qualities to it.
Oh, it does. It does. It's definitely a number of chaos. And then it's been following me. Well, it's my birthday for one, but
Right.
it's been following me all my life in various ways. So,
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was a really cool part of the book that I didn't expect. Because I mean, yeah, people that know me and follow me realize that I'm kind of a Discordian anyway, and in Discordianism, 23 is a big thing,
yes.
and so like that wasn't what really popped up. That wasn't what I expected to pop up reading your book is like a whole thing about 23 being a huge number for you. Because I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah.
is Susan a secret Discordian or
It just happened to work out that way. Yeah.
yeah,
But I probably am a bit of a Discordian for sure. Like
yeah,
I'm very eclectic. Like the book is called Cosmic Witch. I had a number of titles that I was thinking of, and I was lucky that I had a publisher that kind of gave me a lot of leeway with the naming of the book, at least in English, and the artwork and all that kind of stuff. And I had a couple of different ideas, and but Cosmic, which was the first one, And I was kind of like, but maybe I could come up with something a little bit better than. And then I did the cards, and the cards kind of told me to go with Cosmic Witch. Not tarot cards, but a set of cards that Greg Bishop had developed that were pre our ufology tarot cards.
Mhm.
And they just have various different sayings on them, and they have a sigil on the back. I call them the disruptor cards.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, I asked the cards like, what should I go with? And it just literally the card I pulled out of, I think there's maybe 50 or 60 of them, said go with the first one. So, okay, that's pretty direct cards.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's how it became the Cosmic Witch. But yeah, it's I'm actually very eclectic, so there's a lot of things that I bring into my own craft, and that I would consider are pulling from other traditions, and but that little bits that work for me. So it's a little bit chaotic, yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean it is, well, yeah, and it's eclectic and very personalized for
yeah.
you, which I think, as we've kind of already talked around, is it's really important in magic to have your own personality expressed that way, you know,
Mhm.
or yeah, because you bring UFOs into the witchcraft as well. It's kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, you got some UFOs in my witchcraft. You got witchcraft in my UFOs. But
Exactly. That's kind of unexpected. Nobody expects the UFOs in witchcraft.
right. But it also makes perfect sense. I mean, there's so much corollary there. Like I like how you talk about visions of flying and yourself flying, and then you talk later about the Wizard of Oz and the flying monkeys, and then also like UFOs. Like there's a poetic kind of subtle numinous overlap between
Hmm.
between witches and UFOs that maybe isn't apparent on the surface, but if you think about it in terms of um, what I call reality rhyming with itself, is
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean it does. It makes perfect sense, even if it seems unexpected. Um,
It does. It does. When I've had a number of people who've read the book and that have had UFO experiences and that have said to me, I never related my UFO experiences before with my witchcraft. But now it's making sense to me. And
right.
that I feel good about that. If I've helped in some way inspire some new way of thinking, I like that. The book's very personal. It gets into my own experiences, which as a kid were rough. Like nobody really wants that as a kid, You don't want to be seeing these strange little beings and not knowing what they are and knowing
Right.
that they're not normal. Like even as a kid, like, I can't tell people, I can't go to school and say, "Oh, I saw this," because they're gonna
Yeah.
laugh at me and get beaten up in those days.
Yeah, I mean, for my when I had my own childhood experiences, I feel like I learned pretty quickly that I could only share it with people that I really trusted, you know? It wasn't something I was telling everybody, and uh um I like how you frame it though in the book as a sort of initiation. So, the having the weird experience itself, being an experiencer is kind of an initiation, whether you whether you think of it that way or not, right? So,
Yeah, at least it's initiating you into the idea that reality is not exactly as we live it in our day-to-day lives. It's much more richer, and there's a lot more going on around us than we are normally aware. So it gives you that sort of, that knowledge, and that knowledge can be frightening and very disruptive. So
yeah,
in many ways, and that's how initiations are described as being painful. Even like going back to the Freemasons, they use the sword in that in a way to remind of the pain, right?
Right.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, so
Yeah.
it is an initiation, particularly if it's something that's happening on a regular basis and not just, a one-off. I've investigated UFOs as well. And sometimes people just have one experience and then that's it through their life. But then there are others that seem to have had numerous things, or when I would speak to people about their UFO experiences, and once they meet me and become comfortable with me, tell me that, yeah, I had this really strange experience I can't explain. But, when I was growing up, my aunt's house was haunted, and we all knew it was haunted because we had these strange experiences there. So for some people, it's like a lifelong thing. And that can be very frightening, and yeah, causing a lot
Yeah.
of confusion and pain and whatnot until you can kind of suss it out as to how you're gonna live with these experiences.
Yeah. And classically in ufology, I feel like um, if you were more materialist like NICAP was back in the day, or
Mhm.
MUFON tends to be, uh, they find it problematic when there are what they used to call repeaters.
Mhm.
Like a one-off case was more believable than somebody that had repeatedly seen UFOs. And that's not even taking into account other paranormal phenomena. And I feel like that's something that for the longest time made people less credible if they had a variety of paranormal experiences. And
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
And it's weird how they like I did a chapter in Jack Hunter's book Deep Weird. And
Mhm.
I touched upon a case from France where initially, and I think he was a doctor, if I'm remembering correctly, that it was a doctor and he had had this experience and he had gone on and this gone into the French media and whatnot, and he seemed like a very credible, respected witness who had this sighting. But then, like a couple years later, he went on to have other sightings. And with those sightings, everything was kind of downplayed. It wasn't in the media anymore. And it seemed as if he had lost credibility simply because he was having more than one experience. So
Yeah.
the idea of the book Deep Weird is kind of exploring like people's their boggle factor, so to speak. So
Mhm.
you can have this strange experience and once, okay, but two, three to, oh no, now that's too much. I can't accept that. And this
Right.
is unfortunately what people who have these repeat experiences face. Like, one
Yeah.
encounter, okay, but several, oh, you're making it up or you're crazy or whatever, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense because, um, I mean, for the average person that doesn't consider these things all the time, the
mhm.
less crazy people out there. But, people maybe like only consider it in terms of fiction, or they never had their own personal experiences. Although I don't think those people really exist. I think everybody has weird experiences, and it's just whether you choose to recognize it or not. You know,
Oh
um,
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I think so. And like I remember getting into some sort of philosophical debates with psychics, early on when I was starting out investigating all these things, and the with the idea of, children are closer to the veil, so therefore they'll experience more things. And I used to say, I don't believe so. I think what's happening here is children are more easily to vocalize, like if they see something strange happen, right? Like,
mhm,
say, for instance, all of a sudden one of these stuffed animals behind my desk here comes floating along. I know the
yeah,
audience can't see it, but I'm holding this cute little Halloween kitty, and I'm making her
yeah,
cross the screen here. Okay, so a child will say, "Oh, look, there's a cat floating by that woman's head." Uh, but an adult will just, did I just see that? And
right,
these things, these paranormal things, they tend to be very subtle and happen very quickly. So an
mhm,
adult will start to rationalize it. where a child will vocalize it and they won't learn to rationalize it until they're told to, until they're like, oh, no, you couldn't have seen that. That's impossible. You know,
Hmm.
when children start being talked to in those terms, that's when they're discounting these things. So I would get into these, and I could be completely wrong. Maybe they are closer to the veil. I don't know. But I do
Right.
think that children are more likely to vocalize weird stuff, like, hey, what's that? Than
Yeah.
an adult who might be like, am I really seeing this? Is this something else,
Well, when you think about it too, I think from what I understand of developmental psychology is that by a certain age, you've pretty much wired yourself for what your reality is. I mean, when
Hmm.
you're very small, when I had my experience as a really young kid, it's a
Hmm.
couple, amorphous uh, areas of light that
Hmm.
entered the room and started talking to me. Um, I hadn't formed an opinion of what was possible in the world yet. I mean, every day as a little kid, you're learning new things. You don't know how the world
Hmm.
works, right? So when you encounter something really strange like that, you might not even register it as strange. You're just
Hmm.
like, oh, here's a thing that's happening.
Exactly,
Why don't
exactly.
I just go talk to these balls of light? Like
Mhm.
let's see what they're all about. It's
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, it, I think people maybe need to think about, or I mean, if you have children too, I mean, you're uh, um, you see how children learn and grow, and
Mhm.
it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when my son was small, it was it kind of allows you to relive that in a way, seeing them learn. So
Did your son also have these experiences? Do you mind if I ask?
not that I know of. I mean, uh, he uh, he never really told me anything like that, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Now he's a teenager, so he doesn't talk to me anyway. He
Yeah. It's that
watches
it's that
TikTok
age,
videos.
right?
Yeah.
It's that age. Yeah, I have three girls, and two of them have had strange encounters of their own. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a strange thing too, is when it's generational like that. Um, you see that a lot in the case histories of experiencers where like one of their parents had an encounter, or their children continue to. So I don't really know what that's all about, if there's a genetic propensity for that, but
Mhm.
uh, yeah.
I have to wonder that too, because so my father, he was a scientist, and an engineer, but he had a UFO encounter in the Gulf of Mexico when he was doing some fishing there. And I had
Hmm.
no clue about that until I had my first UFO encounter as an adult. And I talked to my dad and I said, I think I saw a UFO. And he said, I believe you. And he said, I got to tell you something. I saw one of these things and it was in the Gulf of Mexico. And I was blown away because I had never heard this story from him before, where my
Yeah.
mother was very open about experiences she had, not necessarily UFO-ish, but with ghosts, with a little being, a pan-like being, when she was very small, still
Hmm.
living in Europe at the time, and in a rural location, she had like a little fawn person, a little man with looked like that he described to me like Pan. Um, so she like I both of them have had strange things, and then my grandparents had their own stories in that. So I have to wonder if it does, there's something about certain, families or family makeup or whatever that allows people to have these experiences more readily. I don't know. So, but
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean,
mhm.
like, I know my brothers had plenty, and well, I mean, the house we grew up in was more or less just kind of haunted, and there's a lot of poltergeist activity going on. But my brother approaches it totally differently. When he's had really scary encounters, like I might hear the
Mhm.
story from him, but then if I ask him about it again later, he's like, "No, I never want to talk about that," because he thinks it's just going to encourage it. Which he might not be wrong, but he just he doesn't want it to come back. He's
Yeah.
like, "Nope, that's buried. That's buried in my memory bank. It's not coming out." You know. So he
Yeah.
does kind of the opposite of what I do, where I'm always just
Mhm.
poking at it. So
Yeah, well that's one of the things that you have to like, and I've cautioned people before as an investigator and researcher, people that do want to go these deep dives, if you do, if you start like, for instance, you're in a haunted house and then you decide you're going to bring in a Ouija board or you're going to try to make a communication or use EMF detectors or bring in a ghost hunting team or whatever, this can actually amplify it. So
right,
you have to, and that's as long as you're prepared to live with that, then that's okay. Like
yeah, and
it's
it
your
might,
choice, but you should be aware that you can amplify it and then you're living, with even more crazy stuff happening. So
yeah, no, I mean it's certainly something to be aware of, or you could just kind
mhm.
of generate it whole cloth out of nothing. You know,
Mhm.
um, I think I heard you on a show at one point talking about the Phillip experiment. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a favorite of yours, right?
Oh, it's a favorite of mine, yeah, because I also got to meet some of the participants and I met their scientific director, Joel Wheaton.
Wow.
And so because I wanted to replicate it and I did do some experiments, not in the same sense, I did them online. That'll be part of a secondary book that I'm writing, which is more of a magical cookbook, so to speak, of things that I've done to provoke the UFOs, uh,
Yeah.
or coax them out, so to speak. And part of that was inspired by A.R.G. Owen. So for any listeners that may not be familiar with it, it was a group of people in Toronto under the auspices of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research that decided they wanted to test the idea if they could create a ghost out of a
Mm,
fictional story. Now, they got a group of people together. They were very diverse. But part of the screening process, which I found very interesting, it's relating to what we were talking about earlier about playfulness, is that the people were given a task to pick out a children's book, something that, resonated with them, a favorite childhood book, pick a character and act that character out.
mm,
And what they were looking for are people who are creative and playful. So now they did screen them for psychological problems or anything like that to make sure that they were psychologically in a good place, which you really should be. This is why grounding's so important.
yeah.
If you get involved in doing occult rituals or that, you should really try to make sure you're in a good headspace or take a break from it. And same with paranormal stuff. And anyway, so that these people got together and they created a fictional story that sounded believable enough, but they purposefully included historical details that were inaccurate. Okay. In trying to ensure that they could not be conjuring up a real historical figure. And they came up with Philip, and he had a whole backstory. He had this love affair and all this kind of stuff, this bad marriage and blah, blah, blah. And he was set in a certain time. And at first, nothing happened. Okay.
Yeah.
But as they went forward, they decided that instead of just sitting in a room and talking this out, they were going to get like a round, old Victorian style table and put together an actual seance-like surrounding.
Mm,
And then they started to get psychic uh, um, phenomena, such as the table was levitating. They were getting old, like raps, like knocks, like poltergeist stuff. to answer their questions. They were questioning Philip. This stuff it went so well that they actually moved the table to Ohio State University, where physicists were studying these raps. They went on television, all this stuff happened that came out of it, and then they wrote this wonderful book, Conjuring Up Philip.
Yeah.
Now, according to their director, Joel Wheaton, they had wanted to conjure an apparition. And that didn't happen for them. But they were very happy that they had these psychokinetic this physical phenomena that happened with the raps and the levitations and things like that. And then
Right.
once they got that formula down, after that experiment ended, they were doing fun things like they conjured Santa Claus on Christmas. So
Yeah.
they were conjuring Father Christmas. Other groups they had success with right away. And part of it they realized was the surrounding. It was being in that kind of environment. And when, of course, people became comfortable with each other, like when they were starting to joke and laugh and do things. And I found the same thing as well. Like when I was ghost hunting, it was always like at the end of the night when, we're having our Tim Hortons coffee and our donuts and joking
Yeah.
around. And that's when something happens. And that's when the equipment's all packed away.
Right. Naturally.
So yeah, so Philip really inspired me to want to try and replicate it. Now, initially I wanted to do it by conjuring an alien, but I thought to do that in a group setting is kind of hard to do because like with a ghost, even a fictional ghost, it's a human being. Okay. Albeit a dead one, but it's a human being. Now, an alien is inhuman. So people's psychological reaction to something inhuman is going to be different. And the fact is even if like I tried to think of ways to kind of control the narrative, like say, okay, maybe the alien has crashed on Earth and needs our help,
Hmm.
giving us the power over the alien. If that makes sense to you.
Right. Yeah.
So the alien is coming to us in a humble, I need something from you, and this is why I'm here. But no matter
Yeah.
how I tried to work out a scenario of doing that, I thought like ethically, even if people didn't believe or I didn't want the thought of maybe an alien, coming into someone's bedroom window in the middle of the night kind of thing. Because there's a lot of scariness around like
Yeah.
communion and things. And this is in the pop culture and this is in people's minds. So I don't want to be responsible for harming anybody if I'm bringing them in to do an experiment with me. So instead, my experiments were more surrounding creating UFOs and hopefully having other people in other locations witness them. So we did have success a couple of times and that's going to be part of the future book that's going to be coming out describing that, how it was done, if anyone else wants to try and do it, but you can do that, like
Yeah.
it can be done, it can be accomplished. So
Yeah. I mean, that's that's pretty wild stuff. I definitely
it is wild,
reading
it is wild.
look
So
forward to reading about it. Yeah.
yeah.
And but I do wonder sometimes about Philip, like what happened to him after. Like the poor guy was just kind of invented and just came into being, and then people just
Well,
stopped
there's
talking to him.
okay, so what the Owens felt is that they proved their point that this was a fictional character, that all of these ghosts and whether it's poltergeist phenomena or that is emanating from us and from our mind.
Yeah.
However, okay, there is no way of knowing, even if, say, for instance, it's a fictional story that they're creating, a persona. How do they know that some other spirit, human or inhuman, didn't grab onto that narrative and just played along with them?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can't, if you're accepting of that, and I am, from my, of course, it's my own personal gnosis based in my experience, but I believe that there are all sorts of spirits out there.
Yeah,
How would you know? You really wouldn't, you know?
yeah.
So
Some
again,
spirit that hasn't really talked to anybody ever, and it's just like, well, I guess I'm Philip now. I'll play along, you know.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, if it was created as an egregore, so just even just a type of tulpa-like thing, I mean, eventually you would hope that they would be able to send it on its way. But again, maybe not. And that's what I had to consider with creating like a gray alien or any type of alien encounter in that with that methodology. Well,
Mm.
what if I'm now unable to, at least for other people, you know, if that
Right.
makes sense. And I don't want to have
Well,
somebody's child terrified because they took part in an experiment and then, you know, months later the alien is popping up and, you know, peeking in their windows or whatever. No.
well,
So,
one way around that maybe is if you tried to conjure like Alf or
mhm.
like Mork from Mork and Mindy, you know, just like something really silly, you know.
Yes, yes, exactly. You could try to do that, do it that way, and that would be fine, you know.
Right,
I was just thinking along the lines of that standard
right.
gray alien to see if it could be done. But I can't think of doing it in a way with a group of other people that would make my own personal self feel comfortable that I'm being 100% ethical with people, even if they're
Right.
consenting to do something. I don't want to be bringing harm onto others,
No,
even
that's really
given that
important
chance.
because, yeah, I mean, there certainly has been a lot of harm done in the name of investigating specifically UFOs, but a lot of other things too. I mean,
Yeah,
ghost hunting and the obsession with demons, at least in the pop culture kind of reality TV sense.
for sure.
And, you know, that can be very harmful when you have a family that's dealing with mental health and addiction issues and you come in and
Hmm.
oh, it's demons. It's like you can really, really harm people that way, you know?
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah,
so it,
100%. You know, like it's there I think there's yeah, there's a lot of ethics that are questionable practices within the ghost hunting community and the UFO communities for sure.
mm,
So you have to be careful around these things. And yeah, the overuse of the idea of demons, which do exist. But again, I would caution that they don't necessarily exist as is in the, you know, pop culture or, you know, the Abrahamic religions viewpoints of them. But at the
mm,
same point, if you think you're dealing with something that's so evil that you have to command it and this, you know, then it's probably better you're not dealing with these things. Like,
yeah,
why?
right. I mean, there's,
No one wants to
uh,
live a horror movie, or if they do, that's awful. Like, no.
no, I agree with you entirely. I think that's probably one of the things I want to was thinking about when I got into the whole bewitched thing earlier is when you think about magic. Uh, um, well, no, now I have a lot of thoughts going on, but I'm going to try to try to get to
Okay.
all the points. But yeah, as you say, if you're thinking about magic, like Typhonian uh, OTO stuff with Kenneth Grant and whatnot, and working like H.P. Lovecraft into Crowley's magic.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, people can say, well, like Lovecraft is fiction, and he didn't even believe in this stuff. You know, so like that's got to be all hokum. You know, but like no, I mean anything you put in it can come out of it. Now, and I have to wonder why on earth you would pick Cthulhu. Well, I mean, I'm living in a country where we reelected Trump, so I guess that's. But if you can pick a pop culture archetype, why Cthulhu? Why like elder gods that are out to like warp your mind and uh, cause you to kill people and go into other dimensions and whatever? Like to me, like why not Bugs Bunny? You know, like why
Well,
not
yeah, Uncle Arthur or something from
Uncle
Bewitched.
Arthur?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he was great. Paul Lynde, come on. But I mean, my view, and of course, like I don't judge people. You know, you do what you want to do. But I mean, it's the same kind of idea with people that kind of vibe towards a sort of vampirism as well. Like, I don't put people down. Like, if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you're going to be conjuring, Dracula because you think you're going to, which is also a fictional character, but still you're conjuring, and you think this is somehow going to give your soul immortal life or something, you got to be really careful because there's a lot of negative and nasty things that are already out there. And I
Hmm.
think that if a person is maybe drawn to that form of magic, okay, like I'm going to, call forth Cthulhu from the depths or whatever. I think if you are not in a psychologically good place, or if you are, in feeling powerless, maybe, and this is giving you a sense of power, maybe you need to step back,
Yeah.
and think a bit about why you're drawn to certain things. And like I said, I love horror movies. I actually, really appreciate H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Um, I used to have on my Facebook profile, occult studies, Miskatonic University as my
Yeah.
education. But I thought I might attract certain people that I might not want to, or people get the wrong idea about me or whatever. I shouldn't really care, but I do
Right.
to a point. Um, but yeah, it's like I don't want to live a horror movie. And if you put out there that this is what you're conjuring. It's like using a Ouija board. Ouija board, I can use, it's not going to bother me now, but maybe as a teenager when I thought I could be, conjuring what who knows what that I couldn't, cope with,
Hmm.
or I had that fear,
Yeah.
then it's I could create something really horrible for myself.
Right.
And why would anyone want that? You know? That's why I
Yeah.
also conjure, I talk about Ouija boards as well. Like, yeah, sure, it's a game, Parker Brothers sells it, but at the same point, if you're putting your beliefs into it and you believe what is put out in the horror films, that this is a gateway to hell and blah, 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 you might conjure that for yourself.
Yeah.
And who needs that? You know? No, no.
Well, Ouija boards to me are kind of a funny thing because they get dismissed out of hand because people just say, "Oh, psychomotor effect, mystery solved, all psychomotor effect," and then you're like, "Okay, but suppose that it is the psychomotor effect moving the planchette on the board, and you come up with information that you should not have known. How do you explain that? That's not explained away by the psychomotor effects. You know, what if poltergeist activity happens in the room that you're in while you're using an Ouija board? And that's what happened to me
Right.
the one time I ever really did it.
Yeah.
It had just had immediate poltergeist activity in the room. So um,
Hmm.
that's always one of those. I think with every kind of paranormal event, phenomena, tool, story, there's so many layers to it, and I think people have a tendency to oversimplify, which is which is problematic. But it's always so interesting to think about it. It's like because there is a push and pull, there is like a feedback loop where there's perfectly rational things going on, there's very silly things going on, and there's downright spooky things going on. You know,
Hmm.
there has to be the right mixture, the right cocktail to make a really profound paranormal experience. I think. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and it does, and people should keep that in mind when they're doing these things for sure. You know?
Yeah. Right. I think being lighthearted about it is a big part of it. I feel like that's probably something I've said so many times that maybe people are sick of hearing it, but I think it's
No,
important.
it is very important. Of course it is. It should be the way we are in general, just having to negotiate the never mind consensus reality, which is like a horror show lately. Like we have to
Right.
I mean, we can take the things we're doing seriously, but not ourselves, I think is good. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, there are serious concerns. So like lightheartedness and playfulness begets kindness, and kindness is super important. Yeah, and I really appreciate that you take such measures to be ethical with the investigation, as you were explaining earlier, with an experiment like the one that you were talking about,
Mhm.
conjuring an alien and stuff. Because one of the things I think of paranormal and UFO studies as being a double-edged sword, because you don't need qualifications to get into it, right? There's no barrier to entry, which is kind of good. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, that means there's no protocols and there's no codes of ethics. So that's bad, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, common sense and kindness and empathy for other people should be what's leading. But even in the way that, like, I've never really liked the ghost hunting TV shows because a lot of them you have people screaming at
Right,
supposedly, deceased and these are deceased people. And even if they were nasty in life, well, they were somebody's baby at some point. Somebody might have loved them. I mean, they're human. Is this
yeah,
how you would want to be treated? Talk to me, like, or
right, yeah,
do something. Or you're screaming at them or screaming at demons or whatever. It's like if I was a demon and I'm like, what?
yeah,
There has to be a point of being ethical and understanding, and I think that that sometimes can get lost in the idea of being spooky entertainment.
yeah,
Is that,
right,
a ghost is a former alived person.
hmm,
You would want to treat, how would you want to be treated if you were in that situation? You
yeah,
know, as a
right,
point of entertainment or approach these things with compassion. It's like with the whole demon thing. And I was having this conversation with my friend Greg Bishop, um, is that when it comes to the high ceremonial magic and commanding demons and stuff, it's never really felt good to me personally. It's like, if I wanted to commune with a demon, I might say, hey, demon, do you want to share a cup of tea with me and we'll have a chat? As
right,
opposed to trying to command and bind because of course they're going to be nasty and angry and that because they've been oppressed and bound anyway. Like, so why do
right,
you want to further make them suffer? Yeah. Like if
yeah,
you treat them as you would another soul or spirit. Maybe I'm being naive here. I don't know. But I'm just saying, if I wanted to talk to a demon, I'd be like, hey, demon, do you want to have some brownies with me and tea and we'll chat on the mountaintop over here? Like, I'm not going to bind you. You can come or you can go. I don't care.
right. Well, I have casually said before, I've
Maybe
casually
that's
mentioned,
naive. I don't know. Maybe I'm.
yeah, I have casually said on podcasts before, like, I think demons get a bad rap, and people are like, what? And I forget who I'm talking to sometimes, because not everybody's, you know, but I mean, I'll just say it. I love demons. Like I love
Yeah.
reading about them because there's so much. And like I have I have a copy of the Dictionnaire Infernal in the other room, the
Hmm.
J. Colin de Plancy one, and it's in the
Yeah.
original French, which takes me forever to read because
Hmm.
I know a little French, so like I can kind of piece it together through context clues and learn words as I go. But
Yeah.
I mean the drawings. I mean, one of my
Hmm.
earliest books on weird stuff was it was just called Monsters by Pearl Epstein, and it had a picture of a demon on the front. He's the unicorn headed guy. Crap, forgetting his name now.
Okay.
but I was like amazed with that as a kid, and so I feel like ever since I was little, I had this kind of like affinity for uh, demons, and I think there's just a whole range of them.
Well, there's a bunch of them, and I think some of them are worse than others. Some of them are real sweethearts, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think they
I'm
can
not
be
saying that
more.
sarcastically either.
No,
I
I
mean,
know, I know, because I think they could be more accurately be called infernal spirits,
yeah.
and there's a whole range of those, and it's really interesting to see how in a collection like Duplancy's, how it really is a dictionary. He's
Mhm.
including all kinds of things, but um, how gods in some places became demons, and sometimes
Mhm.
it goes back and forth. So you can see how uh, um, that it's a matter of who's looking at it when.
Exactly. It's like some
Yeah,
of these old pagan gods, that school of thought that they're actually were made into demons by the early religion or the early Christian religions or Abrahamic religions to kind of, take away their power and bind them and say, okay, these are these evil fallen angels. So
yeah,
yeah, I hear where you're coming from. And I would think that like, if you wanted to work with them, you just have to keep that in mind to be respectful. But at the same point, I wouldn't if you really buy into the Exorcist film and movies like that, like
right,
because you're
yeah,
gonna because that's gonna it's almost like that co-creative process as well, right? Like
right,
if you're gonna but I mean I think they're interesting too. I think they're more interesting in some ways than their angelic counterparts.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't know that I necessarily want to talk about it
Yeah.
yet, but
Yeah.
I mean, there have been times where I'm looking into stuff, and it does almost seem like there's one of the demons is uh, trying to tell me stuff and trying to lead me a certain way,
Mhm.
and I'll just be like, okay, well, um, this seems like an ancient entity that is maybe above my pay grade, so I'm going to put this aside for now.
Yeah,
It's
for
not.
sure.
When you feel a little bit of fear and trepidation like that, maybe that's the best thing to do, is to just kind of back away, and give it some time and make
I would
sure.
I would give it some time but I mean I think when it comes to a being like that there should always be and you'll always have that a little bit of trepidation like I would be shocked if you didn't
Right.
but because they're a different type they're even different than the nature spirits which is where I'm kind of at especially lately I've been really drawn to certain plants and
Mhm.
those spirits. But when it comes to like the demons and that, I think it's wise to always feel a little bit, like you're dealing with something that is far more ancient and is not, human. Therefore, we can't really guess intentions and agendas and things like that. So you should always approach with,
Yeah,
um,
especially the ones that have attributed to them a lack of trustworthiness. Like there are certain ones that are like, This
yeah,
one always lies to you," like,
yeah.
or "This
So I
one's gonna
mean,
try to trick you." So they're not all that way, but you know,
no,
um,
no, of course not. But you should do what feels best for yourself and like only if you really want to. Like I will meet these on the on the other plane, but in more of a sleep or meditative state
mm,
and if I start to go into it, I have ways that work for me that I can just sort of end that. Like,
yeah.
but
Well,
you know,
that's important. Like I think of it as like establishing boundaries, like you would with a human
yeah,
being, and that's
yeah,
really
we
all it
always
is.
have agency and
Yeah,
with these beings as well. So it's good to remember that.
right.
So yeah. And when
Yeah,
you're meeting these things, it's the same as when you're meeting humans. I mean, sometimes people seem really nice and cool, and then you find out, oh my God, that person's like can't trust
right.
them. And it's the same in the spirit realm, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think it's a much healthier way to look at it. And as you alluded to, there is a danger in anthropomorphizing, projecting human motivations and intellect and emotion onto non-corporeal entities, because they may not think like us at all, or perceive
Exactly.
things like us at all. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
mean, it's the same with anything within the spirit realm, or even if, like, say we want to contemplate the existence of actual aliens from other planets and other worlds. It doesn't, even if they look like us, which is possible.
yeah,
I buy into the ideas of Rupert Sheldrake that nature repatterns itself.
yeah,
We have the same building blocks throughout the cosmos. So why wouldn't things develop a certain way that would be similar? But even if it's similar, we have no idea if the civilization developed similarly, or,
right,
if, and so you can't really say what an alien is thinking or what their agenda would be, or what their agenda would be with us. You wouldn't know, because they're alien, right?
yeah,
Like they're not, they're not even of nature. They're not even here where we can,
right,
we're just starting to understand, like, non-human intelligence on this planet. We're just
right,
scratching that surface, the
yeah.
majority of us, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I live with a couple non-human intelligences in my house, and like my cat, I
mhm.
have no idea what her agenda is most of the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's thinking. So,
Right.
but
So,
and
who
that's a
knows?
helpful way to think of it, I think. Just think about your pets. Like you may have some kind of relationship and communication with a pet, but still you don't really understand how they perceive things. And we like to anthropomorphize them as well, attribute human qualities to like a cat or a dog.
Hmm.
Um, that may be illusory. It just might be a way that we form a bond with them. But yeah, it's helpful to think of just animal and plant life on this planet, um,
Hmm.
when you're thinking of other non-human intelligences. Um,
Exactly.
instead of just treating it as a one-to-one equation. They're going to be like us because they're intelligent. Yeah,
Yeah, they're coming to this planet, and they're sending their probes, and they're going to be doing this and that, just like we would do, right? Because
right.
they're exactly like us. Like,
Yeah,
only a few steps ahead in technology.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's where I take issue with. Um, well, I don't really take issue with it. That's where I diverge in opinion from a lot of scientific thinkers. Like kind of like the way Avi Loeb talks about sending probes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it is a little bit anthropomorphic. It is kind of a little bit like, well, this is probably what we would do if we were sending out or trying to explore something. And it
Yeah.
makes
And I
sense.
think,
I mean, it's solid. I think it's a solid point, but on the other hand, it's like, well, they might think completely differently. I don't know. So
well, and that's the thing. And I find, like, with a lot of the people that are, coming into this topic post 2017, they really haven't studied the literature.
yeah,
They're not really that familiar with the topic. They
mm,
don't understand, like, the paranormal aspects that seem to be interwoven with all of these, these experiences with UFOs, the way, like, say, Alan Hynek was, which is why I
yeah,
really love the Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie, because which I did a large part of my reframing the debate, the book with that Robbie Graham had edited back in the day, was based in that film, because what impressed me is how so much of the paranormal, like the telepathy, the poltergeist activity, the synchronicities, all these things were interwoven in the film because of Alan Hynek, because he
mhm,
took the time to listen to the witnesses, and he started realizing, no, wait a second, there's a lot more going on here. And I believe at the end of his life he did believe that this was a paranormal thing, or the paranormal was part of it. Where a lot of people like Avi Loeb, they're coming into this and they're only thinking, oh, these pilots saw these objects, and obviously they must be probes, because we send out probes, and maybe that's true, but I would be
right,
really shocked if that is the simple truth of it all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't think
Uh,
so.
right. Well, I mean, and Hynek, he's the one that coined the term high strangeness.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot to be said for Hynek. He was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. But I think also I've read that was he a Rosicrucian or something like that? Like he was part of
Yeah,
some
him
secret
and him and
society.
Valet were Rosicrucians at one point. So I
Yeah.
think that they did, and I know that there are pictures of them with Anton LaVey back in the day. So they were
Mhm.
exploring the occult knowledge about UFOs
Yeah.
at
Huh,
some
yeah.
point. Yeah.
And so I mean that's really cool too that he was
Mhm.
open to going that
Yeah.
far with it, So, um, so we're kind of at an hour or so now, and we can wind down a little bit. But I did want to mention at least, or talk about your new website, newish or refurbished website, is
Yeah. Oh,
the Paranormal Studies and Intuition website, which is
yes.
just really cool. Um,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I restarted it up. I used to have a website, Para Researchers of Ontario,
mhm,
and unfortunately, I let the domain and the site get away from me a few years back, and it recently, went offline. And so I thought, well, instead of trying to recreate the original website, which I first put together, I think in 99, 97, something like that.
yep.
That's how, yeah. A long time ago, early days on the internet. I think the first incarnation was GeoCities, for those that
Right.
remember GeoCities. But so I've recreated it in part, and I'm putting up some of my older case files and stuff that I'm doing currently as well, because I still like to go out and ghost hunt. I
Mhm.
still like to go out and look for UFOs, and we don't really have much in the way of Sasquatches here in Europe, but I'm trying to coax him here. But that's another story. That's another day, because that'd be, yeah.
Well,
But
maybe you can go find an alpine tatzelworm.
I might, who knows? But I also visit Canada often as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm interested in all this fun stuff. So there's going to be new stuff and some of my old stuff that is being revamped. As well, I did a spook light investigation in Ontario many years ago. I actually, it's being published in a peer-reviewed journal, so I'm really excited about that. But I may take parts of that and put it on the website as well. So, um, yeah, I hope to create a space where people see that,
Yeah.
there's other strange folk out there as well that take this stuff seriously, but at the same time, maybe not ourselves as serious.
Right. Yeah. Well, it looks like you were able to do a little bit of both ghost hunting and UFO hunting in Norway recently. Reading
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
Norwegian lights. I don't have the name of it right in front of me, but that's something that's always fascinated me.
Oh, the
Um,
Hessdalen lights. Yeah,
Stalin, yeah,
yeah, it was wild because when we were there, now normally I have done things before with media in the past, and usually nothing paranormal is going to happen when you have film crews around and whatnot. But in this case, we did have a brief sighting of the actual Hessdalen lights. My
mm,
husband has been observing them. He's been involved in that for a good 30 years now. His interest is in these lights.
right,
And so we did that, and we went to this cathedral, which is one of the most haunted cathedrals in all of Europe. It's very well known, at least in Scandinavia, Nidaros Cathedral. And I had a ghostly encounter there where I felt like an apparition had walked directly through me.
yeah.
So
That's
that's
spooky.
all on the website. Yeah, and I include other people's experiences as well, and some pictures, and with the Hessdalen lights, anyone can really go up there. It's about the midpoint of Norway, so it's quite cold up there, so I'd suggest visit in the summer. If you can do it, it's worthwhile. People do have very strange experiences up there. And the
Yeah,
lights, for some reason, are often seen. Hynek went there in the 80s, and investigated because so many of these people living in rural Norway, which is very picturesque, just setting alone gives you that feeling that there's magical things afoot.
yeah,
Um, and so that, and just even just going there for that is just wonderful. But the people there have had a number of experiences over the years, including seeing like these strange cryptid-like beings and UFOs and light phenomena and all sorts of strange things happen there.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating place, and it was somewhere that I had heard about years ago, and then
Mhm.
kind of forgot about until I saw you post about it recently, and I was like, "Oh man, that's really cool." I didn't
Yeah.
realize Massimo had been looking into it for that long. He's
Well, yeah, yeah. He originally, because like he had gone to a like a market, like a flea market type thing that they have here in Modena, Italy. And he happened to see a book by Jenny Randalls of all people, who was wrote about it in this
yeah,
book. So he bought this book for like €3 or something like
yeah,
and he was reading it and he became really fascinated, and he's like, oh, these people are actually, they're doing scientific stuff out there, because he's an
right,
astrophysicist.
yeah.
So but
He knows his science.
he knows his science, but he's also really open to this weird stuff. Like he's actually really tolerant, like well, he married me, so he'd have to be.
Well, right,
But so he's been going up there for years, and he's very interested in all these things, and because he was in the Galileo project and that too.
yep,
Uh, but he's also interested in the consciousness aspect and other things. But he learned about it from a book Jenny Randall's, and then he wrote to Erling Strand, who runs Project Hestalin, or did at that time, and that's how they started a collaboration together,
yeah,
trying to figure out what these things are. And he has some interesting pictures as well that he was able to take, images of these plasma lights, and some of them are really fascinating. Like to give you an idea, one of the images he has looks like there is within the plasma ball a rectangle. And at the same
ooh,
time, at a place in Hessdalen, a rectangle was cut out of the ground, like the shape of a rectangle in the ground.
uh,
And they didn't know how, like this is huge, huge mound of tundra dirt, which is like partially frozen, and it was missing, and they didn't know. So like as above, so below in my mind, but also the idea of this rectangle to me suggests a doorway.
wow,
So
that's yeah, or a
symbolically.
box or like coffin of some kind, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
also a doorway. Uh,
yeah. So, I
oh,
mean, but it's like when I was there, I didn't feel any sort of like, parts of it felt a little strange, and some of the people's experiences there were frightening. But to me, it felt like a really peaceful, beautiful place. This is my own
mhm,
impression. Whatever there is actually really kind of joyful and fun. So
yeah,
that may be a reflection, I don't know, of
right,
just
yeah,
how I want it to
partly
be. But yeah,
what you bring with you, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't know what other factors play into it, like the time of year or like anniversary dates of things, and who knows,
Who knows? Who knows?
but
But people do have these experiences. So, but anyway,
yeah,
we could talk like this for hours and hours and hours. Like,
we could for sure,
we could go to
but
the pub and like be there till like, all pulling all nighter talking. But
yeah, yeah. But for the listeners, you can absolutely read about all this stuff too on Susan's wonderful website, and it is
Mhm.
paranormalstudiesintuition.wordpress.com.
Yeah.
So I had that much pulled up. So I got a
Awesome.
spinning wheel. I don't know why it won't
Yeah.
load the
And
page.
then
But
I also have a blog where I do like a lot of different book reviews and things. And then I have my main witchy website, which has got other spooky goodness in there.
yeah, and you're on TikTok as well. Are you still doing that, or are you?
I'm not doing TikTok so much because I mean there's just so many hours in a day and you really got to be good at cutting the video and that. But I might go back to TikTok, but I mean I do have my socials up there and people
Yeah,
can reach out to me. I'm really open to hearing about people um who, other witches for one, and people who are like having these high strange experiences. I'm always interested and open in a very non-judging way.
yeah,
Um,
because on your other website, you tend to have like experiences that people sent you that you're sharing with permission, sometimes
Yes,
anonymously
yeah.
and stuff. So it's
Yeah, I did that for like 20 years. Like I have a huge amount of material of
yeah,
people's. Sometimes they'll let me use their names, most often than not, no. So I can't,
yeah,
but yeah, I have a lot of high weirdness.
yeah, fascinating stuff. And your book, Cosmic Witch, is wonderful, and I recommend anybody that
Thank you. Thank
hasn't
you
read
so
that.
much. Thank you.
And it has a great cover by Red Pill Junkie Miguel
Yeah.
Romero, yeah, who also
Yeah.
did the art for this podcast. So
And I
we have
love
a
it. I love it. I love
yeah,
what he's done for like, isn't Miguel's the best? Love you,
yeah, that's
Miguel, if
great.
you're listening.
Okay, well, this has been wonderful, and like you said, we could be talking for hours and hours and probably
Yeah.
never run out of things to talk about. So
Hmm.
I'm glad we've finally had this opportunity to have the electronic face-to-face conversation.
Yeah,
So,
me too. Me too. Let's do it again.
oh yeah, well, we definitely will. All right,
Okay.
thank you very much, Susan.
Okay.
Hope,
Ciao.
all right.